What was life like before the flood? What secrets did that ancient world hold? And how did this cataclysm shape the course of human history? In this video, we'll dive deep into these mysteries, exploring every corner of the past, from biblical accounts to archaeological and anthropological evidence. We'll uncover details beyond the texts of the Abrahamic religions, shedding light on a period that has long been shrouded in mystery. So, stick with us until the end, because what we uncover might change how you see this ancient tale. The time before the Great Flood has details that completely beat the imagination of the average man in the 21st century world. This period in history saw man in a completely different light and fashion. The world existed differently, and nature had a few features that are absent today. Stay with us as we uncover the strangest cultures, men, and beliefs of those who existed in the earliest periods of human history. The world before the flood, in the time of Adam and his first descendants, existed in a way that was very different from what we know today. The world's climate was just in its early stage, and archaeologists and researchers deduced that it was less prone to radio and solar radiation from space and the sun. It was said that the Earth had been engulfed in a shadow of vapor surrounding its atmosphere, which created and made the environment more livable for the first men on the Earth. This explains Adam and his descendants' strange nature and longevity before the flood. According to Bible documentation, men lived for far longer periods than men do today. Adam himself lived for 930 years, which appears unimaginable to those of us who exist today. As documented by Bible history, the longest living man on earth was Moses, said to have lived for 969 years, as documented in Genesis 5 verse 27. Thus, it can be observed that old men, especially the men of Noah and Adam before the Great Flood, lived far longer lives than the average man of today. Another possible explanation for this effect was not only the climate and peculiar nature of the Earth's atmosphere at that period. Archaeologists and theologians also focused more on the genetic composition of Adam and his descendants. Adam's descendants were said to have peculiar genes, peculiar body structures, and natural immunity because of their closer interactions with God and other heavenly beings. As seen in Genesis chapter 3 verses 8 to 10, we can see that man had a closer relationship with God as God came regularly to interact with them physically. This was said to have given them a higher physiological structure and body composition that men and women today lack. Some of Adam's descendants interacted with God even after Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden. Hence, the descendants of Adam were said to have completely different bodies and human immunity that gave them the ability to live for longer periods on Earth. Let's look at a few of them and how their lifestyles created the culture and behaviors of those who existed before the flood. The first two children, Adam and Eve, were Cain and Abel, whom Eve gave birth to in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. Their story remains the foundation for the first murder and bloodshed recorded in the Bible. Cain and Abel offered sacrifices to God. Cain was said to have offered a little offering, while Abel, the younger brother, offered a more prestigious sacrifice. Hence, God accepted Abel's offering, while Cain's was rejected. This angered Cain, and he murdered his brother in cold blood. This led him to be cursed by God to become a wanderer and a vagabond on the face of the earth. In Genesis chapter 4 verses 11 to 16, Cain is said to have taken a wife and headed east of Eden, where he established a city in the land of Nod, naming the city after his son Enoch. Afterward, another descendant of Cain named Lamech arose, who was noted as the first man to be noted to have taken multiple wives and also the first man to have been described as having murdered two people, a man and a young boy. This clearly showed the rise of violence and bloodshed within the human race, notwithstanding other descendants noted for being righteous and faithful to God in Genesis 5:24. Enoch was noted to have lived a pleasing life to God. He was taken up into heaven, never experiencing death. The second person in the Bible to have left the world like this was Elijah in 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 11 to 13. Various people with various skills and crafts arose throughout Adam's generations. In Genesis 4 verse 20, Jabal is the father of all tent dwellers and cattle rearers worldwide. and Tubal-Cain is a brass and iron crafter and blacksmith. Methuselah is known for being the longest living man in the entire world. After Abel's death, Adam and Eve had a third child, Seth, who became Noah's descendants. However, the world was filled with evil during this time, and Noah was the only righteous person in God's eyes. There stood a peculiar reason for the violence and bloodshed that increased in the world of men, that convinced God and made him regret creating man, wanting to eradicate them from the face of the earth. Genesis 6:1-2 speaks of a strange occurrence in the Bible and world history, where the Son of God was said to have come down from heaven into the earth and taken women as their wives. This part of the scriptures has been described in several ways. Still, the most prevalent explanation is that the sons of God refer to the angels in heaven, spiritual beings of holiness, and lights created to serve and worship God in heaven. Still, a number of them were taken by the lust for beauty and the attraction of the women on earth and left their glorious position to be intimate with women. This abominable interaction later led to the birth of the giants, known as the Nephilim, in Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. This created evil on the earth as the giants grew massive and powerful and became prone to wickedness and heartlessness. This led to an era of bloodshed and violence amongst mankind. And God, in Genesis 6 verse 3, declares that man will no longer strive with him, and his days will not be more than 120 years. This clearly shows the end of the special interaction between the descendants of Adam and God, which allowed them to live for hundreds of years. Their violence and wanton sin ended this privilege of a long life they had enjoyed. Then again, who wears the giants? Where are the traces of their glorious era and existence? Scientists and archaeologists have developed different explanations and theories to describe the exact nature of the giant descendants of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The giants have been given credit for massive architectural and unimaginable feats of engineering across the ancient world. The pyramids of Egypt and the pyramids in South and North American ancient civilizations. These are a few objects of antiquity ascribed theoretically to the giants of old. The Nephilim and the giants give a deeper and wider meaning to the story of the fallen angels themselves, because the sons of God who left the heavens became rejected after their crimes. To fully understand the story of the fallen angels, a particular being needs to be examined. Lucifer, known as the morning star, comes into this mind. Lucifer's origin takes place before the world's creation that we humans came to know. He was an archangel described as the light-bearer decorated with musical instruments. He was also called the covering cherub, and an angel of such a high rank that he stood in God's presence. Ezekiel chapter 28 verses 12-17 describes his beauty and splendor. It is said that due to his beauty, he allowed pride into his heart and came to a point where he disregarded God's authority and wanted to be God himself. This convinced a third of the angels to take his side and fight against God in a rebellion against the Lord of creation. But he would learn the lesson of God's power over him bitterly in Revelations chapter 12, verses 7-10, which shows how another archangel, Michael the angel of war, took an army of angels in heaven and battled against Satan and his fallen angels, defeating him and sending him down into the abyss. Satan, known formally as Lucifer the morning star, lost his glory and became the devil, taking with him his falling angels into the world, creating the violence and the evil and the bloodshed, corrupting man to become lustful after all that is evil and taking them far away from God. This was what led God to decide to wipe out totally every living being, leaving only a small remnant on the face of the earth. Noah and his family were the men he found faithful in his sight. In Genesis chapter 7 verse 1, God describes Noah as having found grace in God's sight. He was instructed to create an ark of gopher wood to preserve the descendants of the earth after the great flood. As documented in Genesis chapter 15, the ark was to be 300 cubits long, 450 feet and 50 cubits wide, and 75 feet and 30 cubits high. It would take Noah 120 years to build the ark. During that time, he tried convincing and begging the men of that age to repent, but he was mocked as no one believed him. Everyone continued living the life they desired until the time of the flood came, when it was said that God in Genesis chapter 7 verse 11 In the 600 years of Noah's life in the second month, the seventh day of the month, the same day, God opened and released the foundations of the great deep, and they broke up, and the windows of heaven were opened. It rained on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, wiping out every breathing creature, saving only Noah and his sons and their wives, as well as the male and female of every living creature on the ark. The rain and the water on the floor covered the surface of the earth, creating a flood that engulfed the mountain and every area of land on the earth during the flood. The rain lasted 40 days and 40 nights, and the waters lasted 150 days. It was after this time that the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven stopped. The waters sank back into the earth, and the mountains began to reveal themselves. The ark rested on the mountain named Ararat, and after the ark had rested, Noah sent a raven 40 days later out of the ark. But the raven returned because it found no rest to perch on. Again, after 7 days, he sent out a dove, and it returned with an olive leaf plucked out of its beak, giving Noah hope. After 7 days, he sent out another dove, which did not return, and Noah finally knew that the water had dried up, ending the great flood. The world before the flood was unlike anything we know today, filled with fascinating cultures, strange beings, and a close connection with the divine. If you found this exploration as captivating as we did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to uncover, and you will want to see what's coming next. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.